Hi friends, hope you are all doing fine. I am Dr. Ganguly. So today's video I am going to discuss 5 tips or 5 secrets as far as technical writing is concerned. And as most of you know, technical writing is a very big part of any scholarly work. And technical writing not only encompasses writing papers or thesis, but also books, reports, technical reports, and various other documents you need to communicate as far as any technology is concerned. So it could also include writing of manuals, writing of web pages for technical content, and so on. So let's look at the 5 basic things you need to keep in mind whenever you are doing technical writing. So the number one point is you need to know your readership. And this is important because you need to know exactly the technical level of the reader. So depending on the document, your readership is going to change. If you are writing a journal paper for a journal such as CIM Journal on Scientific Computing, you know that your readership is very knowledgeable about scientific computing, and so you can presume a lot of knowledge on their part. You do not need to explain to them things such as what is the Newton-Raphson method, what is the basics of number theory, and so on. So that's something which you have to always consider. Now, if you are writing a document for a sales publication, or if you are writing a PhD thesis, in the case of a PhD thesis, it may not go to people who are exact experts in that area. So for example, if your thesis has to do with optimization of structures, it may actually go to a person who is an expert in optimization, or it may go to people who are expert in structures. So what happens is that you need to obtain a little bit of information about structures and optimization in simple form and explain in the introduction chapter as to what are these fields for somebody who is not exactly coming from that domain. Now, if you are writing something for a sales publication, you have to presume that the person needs to be taught from very basic level as to what is required. So if you are writing a document for, say, high performance computing, and you are trying to sell a certain type of computer or server to some people, then you need to ensure why this particular server is required. You need to bring out some of the important things in terms of the speed, in terms of some simple examples, and so on. So again, that's a very important thing to keep in mind, is that you need to know your readership. Now let's look at number 2, and that's know your subject. Now this of course comes across as very important and simple issue, but it is actually not. So what happens is that if you don't know the subject properly, you tend to write badly, and you tend to write in a form which is abstruse and difficult for a reader to understand. So in fact, the more you know about a subject, the more simply you can write about the subject. So you will often see that people who have a very good grasp on, say, a subject such as physics are able to write very nicely in terms of either textbooks or in terms of any papers and so on. So essentially, the more you know about a subject, the clearer the concepts of the subject become to you, and you are able to write this in a simpler form. So always remember that if you cannot explain something simply, then you do not know the subject well enough, and so you need to go back and prepare on the subject matter. So let's say an example, if you are writing a paper on uncertainty quantification in structural dynamics, essentially you need to know all these fields very thoroughly. You need to know structural dynamics very thoroughly. You need to know uncertainty quantification very thoroughly. Now, since the bedrock of these subjects is probability, stochastic processes, dynamics, mechanics, you need to know these very thoroughly. So this is actually what is done very often in the graduate curriculum and in the master's and PhD coursework, but that's the basic point, that you need to know your subject very well. Now the number 3 point, and that's you need to structure your document. Now if you just write a huge document and there is no structure in it, there is no sections, there are no subsections, and so on, people are going to have an enormously difficult time reading this document, and in most cases they are not even going to bother reading this document. So essentially that is why this concept of title, section, subsections have come up, and whenever possible take the help of formal sectioning and subsectioning and subsectioning. So if any of you are familiar with LaTeX, you know they exactly have commands for this. They have the \section command, they have the \subsection command, and so on. Now even if you are doing this in Microsoft Word, you can use similar thought process there. So that's very important to section out your document. Now the next aspect is that when you move from section to section or subsection to subsection, you need to transition between these properly. So for example, if you are writing a paper on uncertainty quantification in structural dynamics, and suddenly you started moving from a structural dynamics section to an uncertainty quantification section, then at the end of the structural dynamics section, you need to write a small transition paragraph that why structural dynamics predictions are actually not good if they are purely deterministic, and therefore there is a need to use uncertainty quantification to get better results as far as structural dynamics is concerned. And so in the next section you are going to discuss much more detail about this topic. So this is a typical transition sentence or paragraph. Sometimes it can be a paragraph, sometimes it can be a couple of sentences, but it essentially connects to disparate concepts, so that's often very useful to you. So remember the number 3 point, structure your document, and there were 2 aspects, sections and transitioning. Now the number 4 point is to have numbered lists wherever possible, and in many cases people come up with some type of method or something like that, and it's best to actually list the points in this method. So typically this is what is often done in algorithms. So whenever you are coming up with a certain method to write a computer program, you are coming up with a numerical method, it's a very good idea to put them in steps, so 1 2 3 4 5 like that. Now if you are familiar with LaTeX, there is the enumerate function here, so you can essentially list these documents like that. There is also the itemize function, which essentially puts bullet points, so you can put bullet points, you can put numbers there. Typically I recommend, if you are doing very formal technical writing such as in journals and thesis, you should put numbers, so it should be 1 2 3 4 5 like that. And if you are writing documents which are for more popular consumption, for example you are writing something in a scientific magazine, you can put bullet points there, so that will essentially help you create the layout in terms of numbered list. Now the 5th point is the visual point, and you of course all know the aphorism that a picture is worth 1,000 words. So essentially wherever possible people like to see information presented to them in graphs, and nowadays there are a plethora of graphical options which are out there because of the prevalence of MATLAB. There is also Matplotlib in Python and so on, and also Excel lets you plot a variety of document. So wherever possible, try to plot the information and data you have come up with, and that is going to help the people figure out very quickly as to what are the basic trends in your data. So not only charts, tables, histograms and all kind of different plots which are possible in terms of showing your data, and that knowledge is actually a very important part of technical writing, is that you need to look at all the different ways you can present data. Sometimes it's better to present data in a pie chart, sometime in a histogram, sometime in a line drawing, and sometime in a table. So whenever this thing is there, you need to exactly figure out what is the best approach possible here. And like I mentioned before, always keep the font sizes of these plots reasonable, because you want to be sure that the font size of the plots and the graphs is the same as what is used in the text or slightly bigger, so that people can read these documents. So these were the 5 main points I had today. And one additional point I'll tell you is that wherever possible in your document, you need to give some kind of case study or example. So for example, whenever we are writing a textbook, we try to explain a method and then give some solved problems to actually figure out what this method is. And this concept can even be extended to a thesis or to a paper, is that at first you can solve a simple toy problem to illustrate your method, and then you can work on your much more complicated actual systems level problem which you are dealing with. So again, this is an aspect of technical writing which will help people figure out what exactly you have done. People actually learn the most when they can correlate an actual example with what the theory has shown. So whenever you see any good book, you will always see that they will show the theory, but immediately after the theory they will have an example problem, and this example problem is going to explain the theory out in a manner which people can understand. So these were some aspects for technical writing. Technical writing is not only useful to you in terms of scholarly work such as writing your thesis, writing your bachelor's, master's or PhD thesis or dissertation, but also for writing any kind of journal papers, and there are actually jobs out there for technical writers. So if you are interested in any such jobs, if you are well versed in technical writing, you can branch out into some of these professions and work with various publishers such as Springer, Elsevier and so on. So this was my take on technical writing and some tips to improve your technical writing. I will see you in a video sometime soon. See you then.